Seattle had always smelled like rain and coffee. Ethan Mitchell liked that. It grounded him, the gray skies, the gentle drizzle tapping against the office windows, the constant whir of ideas in the open-plan workspace of the startup he had helped build. A senior software engineer, Ethan thrived in the quiet intensity of code and logic, where things either worked or they didn't. No gray areas, no blurred lines. Emotions, on the other hand, were not something he navigated well. That particular Thursday morning, he wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. Another sprint review, another poorly written block of JavaScript to debug, and perhaps a walk to his favorite coffee shop on Pike Street. But fate had its own plans. "Ethan, there's a new interior design consultant here for the workspace remodeling," his colleague Tanya said, leaning over his cubicle with her ever-present red lipstick and dry sense of humor. "She's in the conference room now. Gorgeous and knows it. You should go introduce yourself. Might brighten that permanently brooding expression of yours." Ethan rolled his eyes. "I'm working." "You're always working," she quipped and walked off. Curiosity won out 15 minutes later. Ethan wandered into the glass-walled conference room under the pretense of checking the floor plans. And there she was, Sophia Carter. She stood by the window, holding up a sample palette against the natural light. Her long brown hair flowed gently over her shoulders, and she wore a light green blouse that complemented her calm presence. Her focus was intense, brows furrowed as she examined the texture of the material in her hand. He hesitated at the door. She looked up. "Hi there," she said, her voice a smooth blend of warmth and confidence. "You must be Ethan. Tanya told me you'd be interested in the layout updates." He nodded, stepping in. "Guilty. I tend to be overprotective about desk alignment and lighting." She chuckled. "Good. That means you care about how people work." "I'm Sophia." They shook hands. Hers were surprisingly warm. Something in her eyes, or maybe in the easy way she tilted her head when she spoke, unsettled him. Ethan didn't believe in love at first sight, but he did believe in recognition, the strange, jarring moment when someone makes you feel as if you've known them far longer than you actually have. "I'm just trying to make the space more breathable," she continued. "This place is functional, but maybe too serious." Ethan leaned against the edge of the table, intrigued. "That's exactly the vibe our clients like. But maybe a little softness wouldn't hurt." "Wow. Did I just get you to agree with a non-engineering opinion?" she teased. He smirked. "First time for everything." They spoke for 30 minutes. About colors and workspaces, yes. But then about Seattle traffic, the best places for Thai food, and which bookstores stayed open late. She was bright, sharp. Ethan found himself smiling more than usual. When she left, she gave him a short wave. "Hope we'll be seeing more of each other, Ethan." He didn't say it aloud, but he was already hoping the same. 3 days later, Ethan found himself in a small coffee shop near Green Lake, scrolling absent-mindedly through work emails. A sudden laugh jolted him from his screen. It was Sophia. But she wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was Ryan Mitchell, his younger brother. Ethan blinked twice, not believing his eyes. Ryan leaned back in his chair, that familiar grin of ease on his face as he played with the stir stick in his drink. He was saying something that made Sophia laugh again, tipping her head back, hair falling like a curtain. Ethan's chest tightened. He hadn't spoken to Ryan much in the last 6 months, not since their father's minor heart scare had brought them home briefly. Their relationship had grown strained, too many childhood comparisons, too much silent competition, and a shared stubbornness that neither was willing to admit. Ryan, the artistic soul, had always been more charming, more emotionally fluent. The favorite of their mother. The one who could make people fall in love with a single song. And now he was making Sophia laugh. Ethan debated whether to approach them. His logical side screamed no, walk away, forget it. But the spark from earlier still lingered. So he stood, coffee in hand, and walked over. "Hey, Ryan," Ethan said coolly. Ryan looked up surprised. "Ethan? Wow. Didn't expect to see you here." Sophia turned, her expression flickering between curiosity and confusion. "You two know each other?" Ryan leaned forward. Know each other? This is my brother. Her eyes widened. You're kidding. Ethan forced a tight smile. Small world. Ryan chuckled. Sophia and I go way back. We were in the same intro to music class back at UW. Just reconnected last month when I played at an art gallery event. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. So she'd already known Ryan. That explained the comfortable laughter. That explained a lot. Sophia seemed to notice the tension. Well, sounds like this is a family reunion. I'll grab another drink. You two catch up. She excused herself, walking toward the counter. Ryan leaned back again, tone shifting. So, what's this? You interested in her or something? Ethan stayed calm. We met at work. She's helping remodel the office. Ryan raised an eyebrow. She's great, right? Smart. Real. I like her. Ethan didn't reply. Ryan tilted his head. Let me guess. You think I'm not serious enough for someone like her? No. I think you fall for someone new every month, Ethan replied, voice low. And you think just because you're the older brother, you get to stake a claim first. There's no claim, Ethan said sharply. But maybe don't treat her like another name in your playlist. Ryan's jaw clenched. I'm not playing games, Ethan. Don't make this about us again. Before Ethan could respond, Sophia returned with 3 coffees. She handed them out with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. They sat in silence for a few minutes, sipping quietly. The tension between the brothers buzzed like a silent alarm. Ethan realized something important in that moment. This wasn't going to end well. 2 brothers. 1 woman. Too much history. The first spark had already lit the fuse. Ethan couldn't stop replaying that moment in his head, Ryan's smirk. The way Sophia looked at him like she knew him deeply. It unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Back in his apartment that night, he stared at the lines of code on his laptop. But they blurred into irrelevance. He had known Sophia for only a week, but something about her had pierced through the mental armor he wore since college, quiet longing, maybe. A hope he hadn't realized he still had. And now, of all people, Ryan had to be the one sitting across from her. He threw his hoodie over his shoulder and went for a walk. Seattle's streets were quiet after 10 p.m., slick with a light drizzle. He wandered down to the waterfront, thinking of the countless times he and Ryan used to race their bikes here as kids. Back then, the rivalry had been playful. Now, it felt like war. Across town, in his basement apartment cluttered with musical instruments and open notebooks, Ryan strummed his guitar aimlessly. Sophia's laugh lingered in his ears. He hadn't seen her in almost 4 years, but reconnecting with her had felt strangely right. Her elegance. Her balance between passion and calm. She reminded him of the kind of person he wanted to become. But seeing Ethan walk into that coffee shop had lit a different fire. It was always like this. No matter what Ryan did, sports, music, school, Ethan had always been there first. Older. Sharper. More disciplined. Ryan had learned early on to compensate with charm, with rebellion. Their parents, especially their mom, had always said, "You're both gifted, just in different ways." But Ryan had known who got the proud smiles when report cards came. Now, it seemed they were walking toward the same woman. Again. The following Saturday, Sophia invited Ethan and Ryan, separately, to the same design showcase downtown. She didn't know she was walking into a storm. The event was hosted in an Art Deco building near Capitol Hill. Soft jazz echoed through the open space. Walls were lined with samples of innovative interior concepts, each booth glowing with creativity. Sophia was presenting her latest project, a minimalist studio inspired by Pacific Northwest nature. Ethan arrived early, dressed in a crisp navy blazer, his hair neatly combed. He scanned the space and spotted Sophia arranging samples. "You're early," she said with a smile. "I wanted to see your work before the crowd arrived." He meant it. Her display was stunning, soft wood tones, cool lighting, earthy textures. It felt like calm in physical form. "I like it," he said. "It feels like breathing room." Sophia's smile widened. "That's exactly what I was going for." But before their moment could deepen, a voice rang out behind them. "Room for one more?" Ethan turned. Ryan stood in his usual relaxed fashion jeans, a leather jacket, his guitar case slung casually over one shoulder. He grinned at Sophia. "Didn't think I'd miss this," he said. Sophia looked genuinely pleased. "You came. I didn't know if you'd be free." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Actually," Ryan continued, "I even wrote a little background tune for your concept. Want me to play it?" "You wrote a song?" she beamed. Ethan watched as Sophia ushered Ryan toward the small performance corner of the venue. Within minutes, Ryan was seated, tuning his guitar, attracting attention like he always did. The first chord strummed gently. A melody bloomed soft, earthy, like wind through trees. The music resonated perfectly with Sophia's design. He didn't just understand her aesthetic. He felt it. People began gathering. Some recorded on their phones. Sophia watched, eyes bright. Ethan stood at the back, feeling invisible. He hated that feeling. Hated that Ryan could so effortlessly steal the spotlight again. After the applause, Ryan walked back to Sophia, grinning. "I call that one moss light. Thought it matched your vibe." "It's beautiful," Sophia said. "Really? Thank you." Ethan stepped forward, his voice cool. "Since when are you a professional mood reader?" Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Since I stopped hiding behind data charts." Sophia shifted uncomfortably. "Hey, come on. Not tonight." But Ethan wasn't done. "You knew I liked her." Ryan's smile faded. So, stay away." Sophia gasped softly. "Ethan." Ryan's eyes darkened. "You don't get to decide that. She's not a trophy." The tension sucked the air out of the room. A few guests nearby turned their heads. Ethan realized Sophia looked embarrassed. Not flattered. Not pleased. Ashamed. That stopped him cold. He backed away. "I'm sorry," he said, but to no one in particular. He left the showcase, the door clicking softly behind him. Later that night, Sophia called him. "I didn't ask you to fight for me," she said gently. "I know," Ethan said, voice low. "I don't know what got into me." "I care about you, Ethan. I care about Ryan too. But this competition between you two? It's not healthy. It's not love. It's ownership." He didn't know how to respond. "You're both better than this," she added. "But I won't be caught in the middle. If you want something real, it can't come with a war." She hung up. Ethan sat in the dark, phone in hand, knowing she was right. Somewhere across town, Ryan stared at his ceiling, wondering if he'd just ruined his chance, not just with Sophia, but with his brother too. Neither of them had won. And something deeper than jealousy had begun to stir. It had been 3 days since the design showcase. Ethan hadn't spoken to Ryan. He hadn't spoken to Sophia either, though her words still echoed in his mind like a warning bell. It's not love. It's ownership. He hadn't realized how possessive he had become. Not until he saw himself through her eyes, tense, territorial, demanding. That wasn't who he wanted to be. And yet, the image of Ryan, guitar in hand, basking in her smile, kept clawing at his thoughts. At work, Ethan was quieter than usual. He declined lunch offers, kept his headphones on all day, and poured his attention into perfecting a new feature rollout. But even code couldn't distract him from the knot in his chest. When he got home that evening, a surprise was waiting. His mom had called 3 times. Missed calls. Then a message. "Dad hasn't been feeling well. Call me when you're free, honey." He called immediately. "Mom?" His voice was alert. "Hey, sweetheart," Julia Mitchell said. Her tone was light, but he could hear the worry underneath. "Your dad, he's okay. Sort of. His hands have been trembling. And he fainted this morning. Doctor says his blood pressure's all over the place." Ethan's heart skipped. "Why didn't you call me right away?" "We didn't want to scare you boys. He's resting now. But if you could come by this weekend." "I'll come tomorrow," Ethan said, already grabbing his car keys. Meanwhile, across town, Ryan was rehearsing in his small studio. He hadn't written a new song since the showcase. His creativity had dried up, poisoned by guilt. The moment Ethan had walked out that night, Sophia had stopped smiling. Her excitement had dimmed. And when Ryan tried to reach her afterward, her texts were brief, friendly but cold. He knew he crossed a line, both with her and his brother. Again. When his phone buzzed with Mom's name, he hesitated. Ryan, her voice came through, thinner than usual. Can you come home tomorrow? Your dad had a bit of a scare. A pause. Yeah, he said quietly. I'll be there. The next morning, the Mitchell family home felt unfamiliar in its silence. Ethan arrived first. The two-story house in the quiet suburb of Renton still had the same ivy crawling along the porch, the wind chimes that had lulled him to sleep as a child. But now the air felt fragile. Inside, he found Julia in the kitchen, preparing soup with shaking hands. Where's Dad? He asked. In the bedroom. He's sleeping. He's tired all the time now. Ethan hugged her. She lingered in the embrace a second longer than usual. Not long after, Ryan arrived. The front door opened, then closed gently. Their eyes met in the hallway. Neither spoke. Ethan looked away first. Julia stepped in quickly, trying to smooth the tension. You boys hungry? I made the miso soup your dad likes. I'll help you set the table, Ryan offered. They moved around each other awkwardly, like strangers forced to share the same orbit. When David Mitchell finally appeared, thin, pale, but still trying to crack a joke, both sons fell silent. Don't look so grim, their father said. It's just a little malfunctioning body. Happens when you reach 68. But his hands were trembling as he reached for his spoon. It hit both brothers at the same time. He wasn't invincible anymore. After dinner, David went back to bed, and Julia stepped out to call a neighbor. That left Ethan and Ryan alone on the porch. They sat on opposite ends of the old wooden bench. The wind was cool. The silence long. You okay? Ryan asked finally. Ethan didn't answer right away. Then, I don't know. Ryan nodded. Same. A few more beats of silence passed. I messed up, Ryan said. Ethan turned. At the showcase, Ryan added. I shouldn't have thrown it in your face. I knew you liked her. Ethan studied him, unsure how to respond. I wasn't exactly subtle either, Ethan admitted. Sophia deserves better than being caught in this competition. Ryan exhaled. This always happens. We end up at odds. Over school, over music, now this. We were kids back then. And now we're just older kids, Ryan said dryly. That earned the faintest smile from Ethan. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't even know I still cared so much about being better than you until I saw her smiling at me. Same, Ethan said. But when she looked disappointed, it hit me. We're not hurting each other anymore. We're hurting her. And Mom. And Dad. Ryan looked down at his hands. He didn't look like himself tonight. No, he didn't. Another pause. I hate this distance between us, Ryan said. I miss when we were actually brothers. Ethan leaned back, looking up at the stars starting to appear. So do I. Later that night, after Julia had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Ethan opened the old photo albums from the hallway shelf. The ones filled with messy haircuts and paper crowns, mud fights, and Christmas mornings. Ryan came and sat beside him without a word. They turned the pages together. Two boys, once inseparable. Somewhere along the way, they had drawn lines in the sand. Now, they were starting to wash them away. The morning after felt different. It wasn't just the clearer skies or the way sunlight filtered gently through the kitchen blinds, it was the quiet. A calm kind of quiet. For the first time in years, the Mitchell household didn't feel like a battlefield. There were no cold stares, no sarcastic jabs. Just the faint clink of spoons against bowls as Julia stirred oatmeal and the occasional cough from David's room upstairs. Ethan was the first to rise. He poured himself a cup of black coffee, watching his mother move around the kitchen slowly. Her steps were more careful now, like each one came with a mental inventory of what might ache next. Mom, he said gently. Let me handle breakfast today. Julia paused, then smiled softly. Are you sure? Ethan took the spoon from her hand. Go sit. Please. She didn't argue. Ryan came down half an hour later. Hair messy, eyes still adjusting to the light. He looked at Ethan standing at the stove and did a double take. You cooking? He asked, amused. Don't sound so surprised. Julia chuckled from the table. Your brother used to make the best scrambled eggs in middle school. Remember that? Ethan smirked. Only because you pretended they were edible. I never lied. She replied with mock offense. I just encouraged. Ryan took a seat across from her. I remember he used to burn toast every single time. And you, Ethan shot back. Thought Nutella was a food group. Ryan grinned, but then something in his expression softened. This feels nice. Julia reached across the table and held his hand. You boys don't know how long I've prayed for this. The words settled in the air like sunlight. That afternoon, David asked for both sons to sit with him in the backyard. The air was crisp. The scent of early spring wafting from the garden that Julia had tended for years. David, seated on the old wooden chair with a blanket over his knees, looked older than Ethan remembered. His face had thinned, cheekbones sharper, eyes tired. But his voice still held that dry wit that had once been the heartbeat of family dinners. Look at you two, he said. Sitting here. Not throwing punches. Miracles do happen. Ryan smiled faintly. Just trying not to give Mom a heart attack. David's gaze grew serious. I know we weren't perfect parents. And I know we didn't stop you two from becoming rivals. We thought you'd outgrow it. Ethan lowered his eyes. David continued. The truth is, we saw it early. The quiet resentment. The need to be better. And we hoped love would fix it. But love, boys rail love, it's not a trophy. It's not a scoreboard. Neither son responded right away. David's voice grew softer. Your mother's been my greatest gift. And she chose me when I had nothing, just a rusty pickup truck and a broken college degree. She didn't choose me because I won her. She chose me because I was kind to her when the world wasn't. Ryan swallowed hard. Ethan stared at the grass. If something happens to me, David added, I don't want your memories of each other to be full of silence and distance. You're brothers. That means something. Don't let a woman, no matter how wonderful, undo the years you've lived side by side. They sat with him for hours. No competition. No proving. Just presence. That night, Sophia called. First, she dialed Ethan. He answered on the second ring. Hey, I heard from your mom. She told me about your dad. Is he okay? He's resting, Ethan said. We're all here. There was a pause on the line. I'm sorry, Sophia said gently. I didn't mean to come between you and Ryan. You didn't, he replied. We were already divided. You just revealed it. Sophia hesitated. Are you still mad at him? No, Ethan said. I'm mad at myself. For letting it go on this long. For turning something as beautiful as love into a contest. She exhaled, as if relieved. I think I need space, she said. From both of you. I understand. You're both good men, she added. But maybe love isn't what either of you need right now. After the call ended, Ethan felt strangely lighter. Like he'd been holding a weight he didn't realize was his to let go of. Later, Ryan walked into the den where Ethan was organizing their dad's medication. Can I talk to you? He asked. Ethan nodded. I spoke to Sophia, Ryan said. She said the same to me. That she's stepping back. Yeah, me too. Ryan ran a hand through his hair. I think we ruined it. I think we saved it from becoming something worse, Ethan replied. We were never in love with her. Not really. We were in love with the idea of winning her. Ryan looked surprised, then thoughtful. I still care about her, he said. So do I, Ethan replied. But maybe caring means letting go. Silence filled the space again. Then Ryan laughed softly. Do you remember that time in high school when you told me I'd never beat you at chess? You never did. I let you win that one time. You threw the game. Maybe, Ryan admitted with a grin. But I still had your back when you got food poisoning the night before prom. Ethan cracked a smile. And you called my date to cancel for me. She thought I was charming. She still rejected you. They both laughed. And in that laughter, the final bricks of the wall between them began to crumble. The next morning, the Mitchell house was filled with something rare, peace. Ethan brewed the coffee. Ryan played a quiet melody on his guitar. Julia smiled as she watered her flowers. David napped in his chair under the porch awning, the sun warming his pale cheeks. The echoes of old arguments had faded. And in their place, two brothers stood not as rivals, but as men learning, finally, to walk side by side. 1 week after their temporary reunion, Ethan found himself back in his high-rise office in downtown Seattle, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling glass and a soft mechanical hum. His coworkers assumed nothing had changed. He still showed up early, still wrote pristine code, still skipped social events. But something had changed. Every time he reached for a keyboard, he remembered his dad's trembling hands. Every time he wrote another brilliant line of code, he thought of Ryan playing guitar beside their mother's flowerbed. It was hard to unsee what mattered once you had truly seen it. Ethan tried to call Ryan a few times that week. Once, to ask about a song Ryan had played the night before they left their parents' house. Another time, to send him a meme their dad would have laughed at. Each time, the replies were short, friendly, but distant. Something wasn't sitting right. Ryan wasn't doing much better. Back in his tiny apartment, he sat hunched over his laptop, rereading an email he never should have opened. Northwest Creative Grants, shortlist announcement. It was a competitive grant offered to regional artists, and he'd applied on a whim. But what made his jaw clench was the name listed just above his on the shortlist. Ethan Mitchell, Innovative Audiovisual AI Collaboration Project. His stomach twisted. Ryan remembered that conversation vividly. They'd been sitting on their parents' porch. He had casually shared the idea of blending real-time guitar improvisation with an AI-based generative visual system. Ethan had seemed interested, very interested. And now, his older brother was pitching it to the same grant committee? He used my idea, Ryan thought bitterly. Dressed it up in code and called it his. The resentment, long dormant, began to churn again. That Friday night, Ryan showed up unannounced at Ethan's apartment. Ethan opened the door, surprised. Hey, I was gonna call you. Ryan didn't smile. Can I come in? Of course, Ethan said cautiously. They sat across from each other in the minimalist living room, Ethan perched on a modern gray couch, Ryan slouched in a chair with his arms crossed. What's up? Ethan asked. You applied for the Northwest grant, Ryan said flatly. Ethan blinked. Yeah, I thought it could be a cool way to fund something new. Why? I saw your proposal. Ethan leaned forward, confused. How? A friend on the review panel sent me the list. I'm shortlisted too. Ethan's expression shifted. Ryan, that's great. No, it's not, Ryan interrupted. Because the project you submitted, it sounds almost exactly like the idea I told you on the porch. Ethan sat back slowly. Wait, are you accusing me of stealing it? Ryan didn't answer. But his silence was thick with accusation. Ethan's voice grew sharper. You shared a concept in passing. No notes. No plans. I developed it into something tangible. It was my idea, Ryan snapped. You just dressed it up with code like you always do, like you always can do. Ethan stood. Do you even hear yourself? I spent nights building that prototype. If you'd spent half as much time executing as you do complaining, maybe you'd have something to show for it. Ryan stood, too. You always think you're better. Smarter. More deserving. That's not true. Yes, it is, Ryan said bitterly. It's always been you, Ethan. The golden son. The one who gets praised for fixing problems that you helped cause. Ethan's jaw clenched. I thought we were past this. So did I, Ryan said, his voice dropping. Until I realized you haven't changed at all. Neither of them moved. The air between them felt electric. It was happening again, the unraveling, the same spiral that had followed them their entire lives. And this time, there was no Sophia to blame. Only them. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He kept thinking about the look in Ryan's eyes, not anger, not jealousy, but betrayal. And that stung more than any accusation. The truth was Ryan had shared that idea. Ethan had been inspired by it. Yes, but he hadn't intended to steal it. In his mind, he was building on it, making it real, not taking it. But maybe that's what Ryan had felt his whole life. That Ethan built futures from fragments Ryan had first imagined. Ethan shut his laptop and stared into the dark. He didn't want to lose his brother again. Meanwhile, Ryan sat on the floor of his studio, guitar untouched, staring at a folder full of unfinished compositions. He wanted to withdraw from the grant. He wanted to scream. But mostly, he just wanted his brother to see him, not as the screw-up little brother, not as the creative one who never finishes anything, but as an equal. His phone buzzed. It was Sophia. Sophia Carter. Hey. Your mom called me. She said your dad has another test next week. Thought you might want to know. Hope you're okay. He stared at the message. He didn't reply, because for the first time in weeks, Sophia's words didn't stir any longing, only quiet. The next morning, Ryan opened his inbox and started drafting a new email. To Northwest Creative Grants. Subject: Project Revision and Clarification Request. He stared at the blinking cursor. After a long pause, he hit delete, then started again with different words. The following week unfolded like a strained symphony, the kind where every note felt slightly off. Ethan kept busy at work, hoping deadlines would drown out the echo of Ryan's words. He reviewed lines of code, sat through team stand-ups, and even went out for a drink with his coworkers, a rarity. But nothing settled the unease in his chest. When he returned home on Thursday evening, there was a brown envelope waiting on his doorstep. No name, no label. Curious, he opened it. Inside was a printed screenshot, his grant proposal, side by side with Ryan's early concept note. Handwritten across the top in black marker. Build all you want, but remember who planted the seed. Ethan froze. This wasn't Ryan's style. Not directly, anyway. If Ryan had something to say, he usually said it to his face, with fire and volume. But still, the message cut deep. He tossed the paper onto the table and stared at it. Was this really happening again? Another silent war. Born not out of hatred, but years of wounds left to fester? His phone buzzed. Mom, your dad's blood test results came back. Nothing definitive yet, but the doctors are recommending more scans. I'm scared, Ethan. He picked up the phone and called immediately. Back in Renton, Julia sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clutching the phone like a lifeline. Ethan's voice was firm but gentle. I'll come down tomorrow night. I'll take a long weekend. We'll figure it out together. You don't have to. I want to, Mom. She paused, swallowing her emotions. What about Ryan? Ethan hesitated. We haven't talked much. You boys were doing so well, she said quietly. I saw you laughing. Looking out for each other again. Please don't let it fall apart. I'm trying, Ethan said. And in that moment, he meant it. Meanwhile, Ryan was watching his students pack up their guitars in a community center near Columbia City. Most of the kids were shy, nervous at first, but slowly gaining confidence. Teaching them had become the one part of his life untouched by the storms swirling around Ethan and the grant. Mr. Mitchell, a soft voice piped up. Ryan turned. It was Ava, one of his youngest students, a quiet girl with big brown eyes and a chipped purple guitar. My dad says music won't help me be successful, she whispered. But I like how it makes me feel. Ryan knelt beside her. You know what makes something successful? She shrugged. When it helps you remember who you are, he said gently. Music reminds you that you matter. That your voice matters. That's worth more than anything. Ava smiled. And Ryan felt something unlock inside him. He missed that version of himself, the one who helped others find their rhythm instead of always chasing someone else's tempo. Later that night, Ryan sat at his desk with his laptop open. He pulled up the grant site. His cursor hovered over the Withdraw Application button. But he didn't click. Instead, he opened his email and began typing. To Ethan Mitchell. Subject: Look. We need to talk. Body: We can't keep doing this. I'm not okay. You're probably not either. Can we just meet? Not about Sophia. Not about the grant. Just us. Ryan. Ethan received the email just before bed. He stared at it for a long time, then hit reply. To Ryan Mitchell. Subject: Look, we need to talk. Body: Agreed. Let's meet at the park near the old library. Saturday, 10 a.m. No weapons. Neutroface. Ethan. Saturday arrived with overcast skies. The park was quiet, the playground still damp from the night's rain. Ethan arrived first and waited on a bench, watching as a father helped his daughter tie her shoelaces. A few minutes later, Ryan showed up. No guitar. No smirk. Just tired eyes. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Ethan broke it. Got your message. Didn't send the envelope, Ryan said immediately. That wasn't me. I figured, Ethan said. You're too direct for anonymous threats. Ryan let out a humorless chuckle. Still, Ethan continued, I crossed a line. I should have asked you before using the idea. Ryan shook his head. I should have shared it better. Written it down. Made it mine. You didn't steal it, you just moved faster. Like always. Ethan looked away. That's not fair. Maybe not, Ryan admitted. But it's how it feels sometimes. A pause. I hated you a little, Ryan said. When I saw your name on that list. I hated myself, Ethan replied. When I saw what it did to us. Ryan leaned back. Arms crossed. It's messed up, man. We're not even fighting over Sophia anymore. We're fighting over validation. Legacy. Approval from people who stopped judging us years ago. They both laughed. Bitter but real. I don't want to compete with you anymore, Ryan said. Not with music. Not with life. I don't either, Ethan said. Ryan looked at him. So what now? We stop keeping score. Ethan said simply. We start showing up. Not as rivals. Just brothers. Ryan extended his hand. Ethan took it. And in that small gesture, the air shifted. The cracks beneath the surface were still there, but no longer growing. Just waiting to be healed. Together. Monday morning brought a rare warmth to Seattle. The sun, usually shy behind clouds, decided to linger a little longer that day, streaking gold across office windows and sidewalk cafes. Ethan sat by his desk at work, laptop open, yet untouched. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. But his mind was miles away, in a park, on a wooden bench beside his brother, where 2 decades of unspoken pain had finally begun to loosen its grip. There were still things left unsaid. Memories neither of them had confronted yet. But the handshake, they both knew it wasn't just for that moment. It was a quiet vow, no more war. Ethan's inbox pinged. It was a message from the Northwest Creative Grants Committee. Subject, congratulations, award recipient confirmation. Body, dear Mr. Ethan Mitchell. We're pleased to inform you that your project proposal, Echo Wave, has been selected for a $25,000 grant to develop your audiovisual innovation over the next 12 months. You will be invited to a regional showcase next month. Ethan sat still for a long moment. He should have felt elated. Instead, he thought of Ryan's fingers on guitar strings. Of their conversation. Of the promise. Ryan didn't get the grant. He found out that same day, sitting on the floor of his studio while a student softly plucked the chords of Let It Be. He didn't cry. Didn't curse. He just nodded, closed the email, and finished the lesson. After the kids left, he sat in silence. He wasn't angry. Not anymore. But something inside him felt unfinished. That night, Ethan called. Ryan answered on the 3rd ring. You heard? Ethan asked. Yeah, congrats. Ethan didn't respond right away. You want to meet up tomorrow? Ryan paused. You know what? Yeah, I think we should. They met at their old high school. The building hadn't changed much. Same faded bleachers, same rusted chain link fence around the football field. But the years had changed them. Ethan carried a thick envelope. Ryan noticed it immediately. What's that? Ethan handed it to him. Something I've been working on. It's the proposal for Echo Wave. Every draft, every sketch. Every line of code. It's got your original concept at the front. Ryan raised a brow. I talked to the grant board, Ethan continued. Told them the idea was co-created. That I want to share the credit and the money. Ryan blinked. You did what? I don't want to do this alone, Ethan said. And I don't want to succeed at your expense. If this becomes something big, I want you in it. As a partner. Not as a shadow. Ryan swallowed hard. You didn't have to do that. I did, Ethan said. Because you matter. And this, what we're building, it started with your music. Your spark. Ryan sat down on the bottom step of the bleachers, holding the envelope. He ran his fingers along the edge. I wrote you a letter, he said quietly. A while back. After Dad's last scan. I never sent it. Ethan looked surprised. Why not? I was angry, Ryan admitted. But more than that, I was scared. That if I told you the truth, it would just push us further apart. Ethan sat beside him. You still have it? Ryan nodded. Want to hear it? Yeah. Ryan cleared his throat, pulled out his phone, and opened the draft. Dear Ethan, I don't hate you. I never really did. I hated the feeling of being second. I hated the way people looked at you like you had it all figured out. I hated that I couldn't be more like you, but I also hated myself for wanting to be. But what I hated most was that I thought you didn't need me. That I was just noise in the background of your life, unimportant, replaceable. But watching you take care of Dad, seeing you fight your own way through the silence, I realized you're just like me. You're scared, too. And maybe you've been trying to protect both of us in the only way you knew how, by winning. I'm tired of competing. I miss being your brother. I miss having someone who knew me before the world started asking who I was supposed to be. If you're still willing, I'd like to start over. Not from scratch, but from honesty. Love. Ryan. When he finished, there was no dramatic pause. No tears. Just two brothers sitting in the fading afternoon sun, finally facing each other without armor. I'm still willing, Ethan said softly. More than ever. Ryan smiled, genuine this time. Then let's build something real. In the weeks that followed, they began to co-create Echo Wave as a true collaboration, Ryan's music and Ethan's programming. They stayed up late working out glitches, arguing over transitions, laughing like they were kids again. They still fought, but now it was different, productive, respectful, human. At the regional showcase the following month, they stood side by side as the crowd applauded a moving performance that blended Ryan's haunting guitar melodies with Ethan's shimmering AI-generated visuals. People didn't just clap. Some stood. But the best moment came later, backstage, when Sophia showed up. She smiled at both of them, not with longing or tension, but pride. You found your harmony, she said. We're working on it. Ryan replied. Ethan stepped forward. Thank you for being the one who showed us we were out of tune. Sophia laughed. I didn't do anything. You did, Ethan said. You walked away. And somehow, that had made all the difference. That night, they returned to their parents' house. David was doing better, tired, but laughing more. Julia had baked an apple pie. The five of them sat around the dinner table, stories spilling, music playing faintly from the living room speaker. For the first time in years, it felt like a real family. Not perfect. Not polished. But whole. The early signs of spring showed in the Mitchells' backyard. Tulips had begun pushing up through the softened soil. The bird feeder David hung every year attracted sparrows again. Life was returning, not just to the garden, but to the family itself. Ethan stood by the kitchen window, watching his dad walk slowly across the lawn with Ryan beside him. They were discussing tomato plants. David leaned on a cane, his voice faint but still sprinkled with dry humor. Ryan nodded with genuine focus, occasionally pointing at patches of soil like he knew what he was doing. Just months ago, that scene would have been impossible. Ethan's chest filled with something he hadn't felt in a long time, peace. Later that afternoon, Ryan knocked on Ethan's door holding 2 cups of coffee and a rolled-up paper. Peace offering, he said, holding out the coffee. And project update. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You printed something? I know, right? Wild, Ryan said, unrolling a sketch on the desk. It was a design for a small stage, half indoor, half open air. The structure blended wood and metal, vines trailing along its edges. It's for the grant project, Ryan explained. I want us to launch Echo Wave here. Intimate, simple. Not just tech. A human moment. Ethan studied the sketch, impressed. You designed this? I had help from Ava's dad, Ryan replied. Turns out he's an architect. We traded music lessons for blueprints. Ethan grinned. You're bartering now? Like a true starving artist, Ryan quipped. They sat at the desk, sipping coffee and discussing logistics. Ryan wanted local kids to open with music. Ethan suggested integrating a live coding segment, letting the audience see the visuals being shaped in real time. It wasn't just a collaboration now. It was a shared vision. As the event planning picked up speed, so did their visits to their parents' house. David was going through more tests. The doctors suspected early-stage Parkinson's. The tremors had worsened, but his spirit hadn't. He joked often, sometimes darkly, sometimes sharply. "I used to command rooms," he said one night. "Now I can barely command my spoon." Ethan knelt beside him. "You still command this house." David's eyes softened. "And you, son? You've grown into a man I'm proud of. Both of you." Ryan looked up from tuning his guitar. "Even after we nearly destroyed each other over a woman?" David chuckled. "Especially after that. Life will throw you pride, love, grief, and brothers. It's what you do with them that matters." Julia, passing by with a tray of tea, added, "And boys, don't wait until funerals to forgive each other." That silenced the room. Not with guilt, but with the weight of truth. The launch night of Echo Wave arrived with a sky full of stars. The venue Ryan envisioned came to life behind a community arts center in Fremont. Strings of soft white lights draped from beams, and mismatched chairs formed semicircles around the small wooden stage. A local food truck served bao buns and ginger tea. The crowd was a blend of friends, family, students, tech developers, and curious strangers. Ryan stood backstage adjusting his mic as kids from his music class played the opening notes of an original piece. Ethan was at the console nearby, running final diagnostics. His laptop glowed beside a portable projector, code scrolling down the screen like poetry in motion. When their turn came, they didn't introduce themselves with titles. They didn't talk about the grant or competition or firsts. They simply said, "We're brothers. And this is something we made together." The performance was simple. Ryan played a series of improvised guitar pieces while Ethan manipulated real-time visuals, waves of color, geometric fractals, and blooming shapes that pulsed with each note. But what made it magic wasn't the tech. It was the harmony. Not of music and code, but of two lives finally aligned. After the final note faded, the crowd stood, not with roaring applause, but with the kind of quiet reverence usually reserved for church choirs or silent sunrises. Ethan looked at Ryan. Ryan looked back. They didn't have to say anything. Sophia was there too, standing near the back. When they found her after the show, she smiled warmly. "You did it." "We did," Ryan said. "Together." Sophia nodded, her eyes glossy. "I'm glad I stepped away. You both needed each other more than you needed me." Ethan chuckled softly. "You were never the problem." She raised a brow. "Oh, I know. But I might have been the mirror." Before they parted ways, Sophia reached out and took both their hands. "Promise me you'll keep showing up. Not just on stage. In life. For each other." They both nodded. "We promise." 1 week later, David's diagnosis was confirmed, early-stage Parkinson's. There were tears. There were plans. Julia vowed to turn their home into a safe, nurturing space. Ethan offered to renovate the bathroom for accessibility. Ryan promised to play music every morning if it helped the tremors. The disease would be slow, but constant. Just like healing. But now, the family faced it together. On the last page of Ethan's journal, dated 1 year after Echo Wave's launch, there was a single line. "We didn't win a girl. We won each other back." And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he had to be the best. He just had to be present. That was enough. That was everything. There were good days, and there were quieter ones. 3 months after the launch of Echo Wave, the Mitchell family had settled into a rhythm. David's condition, though not severe yet, had begun to manifest in the little ways, the slight slur in his speech at night, the slower shuffle to the kitchen in the morning, the pauses mid-thought that made Julia reach for his hand instinctively. But if the disease was a shadow, then the light was in the way the family moved around it together. Ethan made the hour-long drive from Seattle every Friday night, without fail. He always arrived with takeout from Julia's favorite Thai place, and a folder tucked under his arm filled with updates on the next Echo Wave installment. now being expanded into a sensory installation for therapy clinics. Ryan had moved back home temporarily. At first, he said it was just to help out. But no one argued when he set up a makeshift studio in the garage and started spending his afternoons playing music softly near his dad's recliner. The two often sat in silence, broken only by the chords of old jazz standards or David's occasional request for a Beatles song. One particular Thursday morning, Julia found David in the living room, struggling to button his shirt. His fingers trembled too much, his brow furrowed in frustration. Ryan, walking past with a bowl of cereal, paused. "Need a hand?" David grunted. "No, I got it." But he didn't. After 2 more failed attempts, he dropped his arms, shoulders sagging. Ryan quietly set his bowl down. "Let me." He knelt, hands gentle, buttoning each one slowly. David looked away. "I hate this. I hate what it's turning me into." Ryan didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You're not being turned into anything. You're still Dad. Still the guy who taught me how to climb trees and build a fire." "I feel weak." Ryan looked up. "You once told me strength isn't about lifting weight. It's about carrying others when they can't carry themselves. That's what we're doing now. Carrying you a little. Just until you're ready to walk further again." David blinked, and Ryan could see moisture forming in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. He just placed a hand over Ryan's briefly. That was enough. That evening, Ethan arrived earlier than usual, carrying more than just food. He brought a surprise. In the back of his car was a prototype headset, part of a sensory experience project he'd been developing for EchoWave, Healing Edition. It used responsive sound and visuals to relax and stimulate memory and focus, designed specifically for Parkinson's patients. "I want to try it with Dad," he said to Julia. David, always skeptical of techie stuff, agreed reluctantly. The headset was soft and lightweight, like a pair of oversized headphones with small projection lenses that sat just in front of the eyes. Ethan powered it on and loaded a program titled Memory Grove. The room dimmed. Soft visuals bloomed within the headset, images of pine trees, gentle rivers, old cabins in the woods. Alongside it, Ryan played a gentle melody on guitar, harmonizing in real time with the shifting scenes. David didn't say anything for the first 5 minutes. But when the headset came off, his expression had changed. "That felt like walking through my childhood," he murmured. "Smelled like my grandfather's barn. I even heard that damn blue jay that used to scream outside my window at dawn." Ethan smiled. "That's exactly what it's designed to do. Trigger sensory memory." David blinked. "Well, I'll be damned." Julia chuckled behind her tea mug. The Mitchell boys, saving the world one project at a time. Ryan raised a brow. "And a pretty great soundtrack, if I say so myself." That night, they ate together on the porch. The air was warm. The stars had come out early. For once, the conversation wasn't about what they'd lost or what might be coming, but about small, beautiful things. A neighbor's newborn puppy, Julia's failed attempt at sourdough, Ethan's awkward run-in with an old high school teacher at Trader Joe's. Laughter came easily. And when the night grew late, David raised his glass of ginger ale and said, This is what I want to remember. Not the hospitals. Not the tremors. This right here." No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Ryan clinked his glass against Ethan's. "To remembering," he said. Ethan added, "and to being worth remembering." Later that week, Ryan found a letter on his pillow. It was from Ethan. "Ryan, you once said you wrote me a letter but never sent it. Well, here's mine. And I'm sending it. I spent most of our lives thinking I had to lead, had to win, had to be the example. But you were the one with a soul. The one who saw people when I was too busy trying to be someone. You're not just my brother. You're my balance. My echo. My reminder that connection is worth more than control. I hope when people talk about EchoWave, they don't just remember the tech. I hope they remember the story behind it, the two brothers who finally stopped competing long enough to create something that mattered. Thank you for forgiving me, for coming back, and most of all, for staying. Ethan." Ryan didn't write back. He didn't need to. He simply slid the letter into his guitar case, right next to the chords for Memory Grove. Because some things aren't meant to be answered, just carried. Spring deepened its hold over the Mitchells' home. The backyard, once just soil and old memories, now blossomed with new life. Daffodils danced in the breeze, a cherry blossom tree bloomed near the fence line, and 3 neatly planted raised beds lined the garden path David's legacy now passed on to his sons. Ethan stood outside, hands in dirt, sleeves rolled up, sweat dotting his forehead. He'd spent the past hour with a shovel, working alongside Ryan to plant a new herb garden Julia had been dreaming about for years. "I still can't believe you know the difference between thyme and oregano," Ethan muttered, wiping his brow. Ryan smirked. "Some of us read real books, not just coding manuals. Please. You once thought cilantro was spinach." "Okay, fair," Ryan laughed, tossing him a water bottle. They both leaned against the fence, looking over their work. It wasn't perfect, some of the rows were crooked, a few markers written in Ryan's messy scrawl, but it was theirs. "I think Dad's gonna love this," Ryan said, his voice quieter now. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, even if he forgets what we planted, he'll remember we did it together." That silence, once a chasm, now felt like a place to breathe. Inside the house, Julia was assembling a scrapbook. She had found old family photos, vacations at Mount Rainier, birthday cakes with melting candles, David in his youth holding both boys on his shoulders. She smiled at one particular photo, Ethan and Ryan, ages 8 and 5, sitting in a mud puddle, covered in dirt but beaming at the camera. She ran her fingers over the worn print. Then she flipped to a blank page and added a title in cursive. "The year we came home." That evening, David sat on the porch with a quilt over his lap and a thermos of warm tea. The tremors in his hands were stronger now, especially when he was tired. But he still managed to hold his cup without spilling. Ryan came out first, guitar in hand. He didn't say anything, just tuned the strings gently and began playing. The melody was soft, familiar. Eleanor Rigby, one of David's favorites. Ethan followed soon after, holding a tablet. He'd been working on a personalized app, a simplified visual diary that David could interact with even when memory faltered. Images, audio clips, family photos, all linked to certain gestures and sounds. "Dad," Ethan said, sitting beside him, "we finished planting the herbs today." Basil's already angry at how close Ryan planted the rosemary. David chuckled. "I trained you both in spreadsheets, not soil." "We figured it out," Ryan said, strumming a brighter chord. Eventually, the 3 of them sat in the golden hour glow. Julia brought out cookies and joined them, her arm gently around David's. There was no need for grand conversation. The peace was in the presence. 2 weeks later, Ethan returned to the city with a sense of stillness he hadn't felt in years. He went back to work on Echo Wave, Healing Edition, now in partnership with 2 rehabilitation clinics. The project was expanding, and he wanted Ryan to join the next presentation. They were scheduled to speak together at a local TEDx event, Technology and Tenderness, Building Human Connection in a Digital Age. But before diving into the pitch, Ethan made one detour. He visited Sophia. They hadn't spoken in months, aside from short messages and occasional check-ins. She was working on a design exhibit at the Seattle Museum of Art, a series of interactive installations that encouraged people to walk through emotions, still chasing beauty through structure, Ethan said as he approached her display. Sophia turned, smiling with genuine warmth. "And you're still finding meaning in data?" He laughed. "Can I take you to coffee sometime?" She tilted her head. "As a friend." He nodded. "As someone I respect, who helped me grow. That's more than friendship." She considered him for a moment, then smiled. "I'd like that." There was no lingering ache in his chest, no desire to revisit the past. He was finally living forward. Back at the Mitchell house, David had good days and harder ones. Some mornings he woke clear, cracking jokes and asking about the herb garden. Other times, he drifted, memories slipping like sand through fingers. On one of the clearer mornings, he asked Ryan to help him write a letter. "To who?" Ryan asked. "To both of you," David said. They sat in the study, Ryan typing while David spoke slowly, carefully. Dear Ethan and Ryan, I used to think my job as your father was to raise strong men. I taught you to fight for what you believe, to work hard, to aim high. But I forgot to teach you something more important: how to lose gracefully, how to bend without breaking, how to ask for help without shame. I'm sorry for the silence I let fester between you, the comparisons, the unspoken favoritism. I should have stepped in sooner. I should have told you that your worth isn't measured by achievements, but by how deeply you care for each other. Watching you now rebuilding, planting, creating together, I know it's not too late. I may be forgetting little things more each day, but I will never forget the way you've come back to one another. That is the legacy I'm most proud of. Keep showing up. For each other. For your mother. For yourselves. With all my love. Dad. Ryan printed 2 copies. One for Ethan. One for himself. And the original? He placed it inside Julia's scrapbook, right next to the photo of them in the mud. That spring, the Mitchells began a new chapter. Not free from fear. Not untouched by loss. But full of love earned the hard way. And every time the wind rustled the rosemary, or the tulips bloomed again, or a familiar melody played softly in the living room, they were reminded. Healing isn't a finish line. It's a garden. Something you return to, day after day, and tend with both hands. The air in early summer carried a softness that made everything feel suspended. Days lingered a little longer. And even the wind seemed to pause before slipping through the trees. In the Mitchell household, this season arrived with a strange, quiet clarity. David's condition was slowly progressing. His hands now shook almost constantly, and sometimes his voice would trail off mid-sentence, lost in the mist of memory. Yet, he smiled often. Not out of denial, but from acceptance. Ryan had learned to read the rhythms of his father's illness the way he once studied music, the moments of clarity, the dips, the hesitations between thoughts. He kept a small notebook beside the recliner now, jotting down phrases David murmured, half memories, lyrics, fragments of stories he'd never told when he was whole. One afternoon, while David dozed lightly, Ryan flipped through the notebook and landed on a line his father had muttered a few nights earlier. Some songs you never finish. Doesn't mean they weren't worth singing. That line lingered. Across the city, Ethan was preparing for their joint TEDx talk. The venue was small but reputable, filled with people hungry for inspiration and realness. The event's theme, Rebuilding Connection, was fitting. Ethan stared at the title slide for their segment. Echoes Between Us, Building Bridges Through Brothers, Music, and Memory. He wasn't nervous about public speaking. What unsettled him was knowing how deeply personal this talk would be, not just the facts of the project, but the vulnerability behind it. They weren't just presenting tech. They were presenting themselves. He called Ryan. You ready for tomorrow? Ethan asked. Ryan exhaled on the other end. I've rewritten my part 5 times. That's how you know it matters. There was a pause. I'm scared Dad won't remember it, Ryan said quietly. Won't remember us up there. Ethan hesitated. Then we'll remember for him. The next morning, the brothers took the stage together. Dressed simply, black shirts, no suits, no pretense, they looked less like presenters and more like storytellers. Ethan began by sharing how they'd grown up in a household built on quiet love and quiet expectations. He spoke about rivalry, competition, the walls they built and the years they lost because they didn't know how to say I need you. Ryan followed with a story about the porch guitar sessions, their first real conversation in years, and how one melody led to an entire healing project. Then, without introduction, he picked up his guitar and played a stripped-down version of Memory Grove. While Ethan ran a soft ambient projection in the background, photos of their dad's hands building a treehouse, their mom's garden, the family dinner table lit by sunset. By the end, no one clapped immediately. They just sat in stillness, moved. When the applause finally came, it was long and full of something deeper than approval. It was connection. The very thing they had once feared they'd never find again. Backstage, Julia waited for them, holding David's hand. He had been brought in a wheelchair. propped up gently with pillows and covered with a light blanket. His eyes were wet. "You boys," he whispered. "You made me feel remembered." Ethan knelt down, voice thick. "You'll always be remembered, Dad." Ryan added, "You're the first song we ever learned." David chuckled, then coughed. "And you made it better than I ever could." That evening, they returned home together. The house was still and warm. The smell of basil and baked bread filled the air. Over dinner, David was more alert than usual. He spoke slowly, but clearly. "I want to leave you boys something," he said. "You've already given us everything," Ethan said. "No," David insisted. "I mean literally. There's a box in the attic, labeled Mitchell Legacy. Been there since before you were born." They both looked at Julia, who just smiled knowingly. He said he was saving it for the right moment. The next morning, Ryan climbed into the attic and emerged dusty but triumphant, carrying a medium-sized wooden box carved with their family initials. Inside, they found an old cassette tape labeled Ryan, age 7, first song attempt. A folder of Ethan's childhood sketches full of machine designs and city layouts. Love letters between David and Julia from their college years. A faded flannel shirt that had belonged to their grandfather. And at the bottom, 2 sealed envelopes, one marked Ethan, the other Ryan. They opened them together. Sitting cross-legged on the living room floor. Ethan's letter. "You were always building, even when you didn't know what for. I see now that your real gift isn't creation, it's restoration. You fix what's broken, son. Not just code. People. Lives. Even ours. Keep building bridges. Especially the hard ones. And never forget, sometimes, the most powerful code is the one written in silence, through presence, patience, and love." Ryan's letter. "Your music was always raw, wild, beautiful. And it scared me sometimes because it held more truth than I knew how to speak. You taught me that feelings aren't weakness, they're instruments. Use them. Play them. Let them crack open rooms others are afraid to enter. You weren't meant to be in anyone's shadow. You were meant to be a lighthouse." They read in silence. Then Ryan reached over and pulled Ethan into a hug. It wasn't awkward. It was long overdue. In the weeks that followed, they worked on a new composition together, something that blended spoken word, music, and visual art. It wasn't for a showcase or a client. It was for their father. His memory was fading faster now. But in the garden, in the laughter at the dinner table, in the sound of Ethan's coding keyboard and Ryan's midnight melodies, he still lived. Still echoed. Still mattered. Seattle's skies turned a mellow gray again. The kind that didn't bring downpour. Just a soft, constant drizzle, a quiet backdrop for reflection. Ethan stood by the garage door of his parents' house, now half transformed into Ryan's creative studio, listening to the muffled strums of a guitar and the hum of a vocal loop. Ryan was inside, recording something raw, emotional. He had been writing a song ever since they found their father's letters. The lyrics weren't finished yet, but every note he played told a story of release, of brothers learning to let go without losing each other. Ethan opened the door gently. "Can I come in?" Ryan nodded without turning. "You're already in." He stopped the loop and turned to face his brother, pushing his headphones around his neck. "I think it's almost done," Ryan said. "The song. I don't know how it ends." Ethan sat on the edge of a work table. "Maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's the point." Ryan looked at him thoughtfully. "Like Dad said, some songs don't need an ending. They just need to be sung." Ethan nodded, then paused. "Hey, I've been thinking about something. I might take a sabbatical from work." Ryan raised a brow. "Wait. You?" "Mister, I haven't taken a real vacation since the second Obama term. I'm serious. I want to help Mom full-time for a while. Take Dad to his appointments. Be here." Ryan leaned back, folding his arms. "I was going to tell you the same thing. I was planning to pause teaching this summer." They both paused. Ethan smiled faintly. "Looks like we're learning how to show up." Ryan nodded. "Together this time." Later that day, Julia joined them for lunch on the back porch. David sat in his usual chair, wrapped in a soft blue sweater. Though his energy dipped more often, Today he seemed alert, even playful. "Who burned the toast?" he said with mock accusation, peering at Ryan's plate. "It's not burned," Ryan replied. "It's caramelized." "That's a fancy word for slightly ruined but salvageable." David chuckled. "Story of my life." They all laughed, even Julia. "I had a dream last night," David said suddenly, voice quieter. "I was walking on a pier at sunrise. It was so clear. The ocean, the light, the wood under my feet. I wasn't sick. I was just walking. Alone. But it felt good. Like I was heading somewhere." Silence settled. Then Julia reached for his hand. "You're not alone, love. Not now. Not then. Not ever." Ryan looked at Ethan, and Ethan nodded. They both knew the time was coming. That night, after their parents went to sleep, the brothers sat in the garage studio again. Ryan played a few chords, gentle, hopeful. "I think I know how the song ends," he said. He began to hum. Then added soft lyrics. Words about growing roots in broken soil, about losing the map but finding home anyway. The final line came naturally, almost whispered. "Some lighthouses don't guide ships. They guide the lost parts of ourselves back to each other." Ethan sat in silence for a moment. Then he stood and opened his laptop. "I want to build an animation for it. For Dad." Ryan paused. "You serious?" "I'm always serious." Ryan grinned. "That's what I love about you. And hate. But mostly love." In the following days, the brothers worked as they never had before, without rivalry. Without hesitation. Ethan crafted an ethereal animation to match Ryan's song, glowing threads weaving between silhouetted figures, a shoreline where memory washed in and out with the tide. A lighthouse flickering in the distance. They titled the piece, "The Lighthouse and the Bridge." They decided to premiere it at a small community gathering. No press, no stage, just neighbors, friends. A projector on a backyard sheet, folding chairs arranged under the stars. David sat front row, flanked by Julia and Ava, one of Ryan's youngest students. Before the piece began, Ethan stepped forward. "This isn't a performance," he said. "It's a thank you to our father, who never asked us to be perfect, only present." Ryan followed. "And to our mom, who carried us both when we forgot how to carry each other." Then the lights dimmed. The music played. The animation danced on the sheet like dreams made visible. David watched with wide, damp eyes. When it ended, he didn't speak. He simply reached for both of their hands. And they stood there, three Mitchell men, anchored in the same moment, the same love. Later that evening, as guests trickled out, David asked to be taken back to the porch. The night was warm, the air thick with lilacs. He looked at his sons. "You two are ready," he said softly. "For what?" Ryan asked. "For life. Without me." Ethan swallowed hard. "We're not thinking about that right now." David smiled. "That's okay. I've thought enough for all of us. And I'm not leaving tonight. But when I do, you'll be ready." He closed his eyes and leaned back. "I've lived a good story." Ryan reached into his guitar case, pulled out the notebook of David's phrases, and gently placed it in his father's lap. "This is your story, Dad. In your own words." David didn't open his eyes, but he smiled and whispered, "Thank you." That night, Ryan played the full version of The Lighthouse and the Bridge for the first time, with Ethan beside him controlling visuals. No audience, no cameras, just the two of them in the quiet, playing for the memory of what had been lost and what had been found again. It wasn't about being seen. It was about seeing each other clearly. At last, a heavy silence settled over the house the following week, not the kind born of tension, but of anticipation, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. David's energy had taken a turn. He no longer rose with the sun. His appetite faded, and the tremors that once came in waves now lingered constantly. Some mornings, he confused names. Other times, he drifted into sleep mid-sentence. But in his eyes, the spark remained. Julia kept the house warm, fragrant with soup and lavender oil. Ryan played softer music now, nothing too upbeat, nothing too mournful. Just sounds that filled the room like gentle hands, cradling the moments between waking and sleep. Ethan rearranged his entire work schedule, setting up a small desk in the corner of the living room. He wrote code quietly during the day, always one eye on his father. "Are you boys taking care of yourselves?" David asked one afternoon, voice gravelly but amused. Ryan looked up from tuning his guitar. "We've been eating toast and drinking too much coffee." David smiled weakly. "Just like college." Ethan knelt beside his father's chair. "Do you remember when you drove us across the state for that science fair?" David nodded slowly. "You thought you'd win first place. I got honorable mention." David chuckled. "You cried the whole way home." "I did not." Julia entered then, smiling. "You cried over your pasta at Olive Garden." Ryan laughed, and then wrote an angry poem about injustice and science. Ethan rolled his eyes. "I was 12. But David's hand found his. "You always cared too much." "That was never a flaw, son." That night, after the dishes were done and the lights dimmed, David asked for something he hadn't requested in a long time. "Play me something old," he said, looking at Ryan. "Something from when I was young." Ryan thought for a moment. Then he began strumming a song from the 1970s, a slow, tender tune David used to sing in the car when they were kids. The lyrics were about watching someone you love fade gently into memory, and holding them there, softly, without fear. Ethan didn't cry. Not because he wasn't breaking, but because this time, there was no resistance. Only love, flowing where it needed to. The next morning, David didn't wake with the sunrise. He didn't respond to the usual questions, nor react to Julia's soft touch on his arm. But he was still breathing calm, steady, like the tide at low ebb. The hospice nurse arrived later that afternoon. She confirmed what they already suspected. "He's entering the last phase," she said gently. "He might still hear you. Talk to him." So they did. For hours, they took turns, sharing stories, reading poems, recalling favorite meals, favorite songs, childhood pranks. They filled the room with memories like a patchwork quilt stitched with joy and tears. At one point, Ryan whispered, "You were my first audience, Dad. The first to clap. Even when the notes were wrong." Ethan leaned in. "You taught me how to fix things. And, more importantly, how to sit with things that can't be fixed." Julia stroked her husband's thinning hair. "You gave me a life of gentle love. I will carry it every day." That night, they lit a single candle on the windowsill. The house fell quiet again, the kind of quiet that doesn't ache but reveres. Just before dawn, David Mitchell took his final breath. It was peaceful, almost imperceptible. The candle flickered once, then steadied. Ryan was awake, sitting by the window with his guitar across his lap. He felt it without needing to look. A soft shift in the air. Ethan came in moments later. No words. They stood on either side of the bed, hands resting lightly on their father's. He looked like he was dreaming. They didn't cry right away. They just stood there, side by side. Sons of the same man, one who had taught them not just how to live, but how to let go. The days after passed in a blur, calls to relatives, arrangements, casseroles from neighbors, sympathy cards. But through it all, the house remained steady, quiet, safe. Julia moved with grace and exhaustion, alternating between strength and moments of stillness. She spent long hours in the garden, hands in soil, eyes on the sky. Ethan and Ryan handled most of the funeral details. They chose a simple wooden urn, placed a black and white photo of their father on the memory table, him in his younger years, shirt sleeves rolled up, holding a tiny Ethan on his shoulders, Ryan laughing beside them with a popsicle. The funeral was small, intimate, exactly as David had wanted. And at the end, after all the prayers and thank yous, Ryan stood with his guitar and played The Lighthouse and The Bridge one final time. Ethan sat nearby, running the visual projection on a screen behind them. When it ended, there was no applause, just silence, and soft sobs, and the knowledge that something sacred had just been shared. That night, back at the house, Ethan and Ryan sat on the back porch. No words, just the chirping of crickets. The stars looked closer than usual. "I thought it would destroy me," Ryan whispered. "What?" Saying goodbye like that. Ethan looked up. But it didn't. Ryan shook his head. It anchored me. Ethan nodded. He taught us how to stay. Ryan took a deep breath. Now we teach each other how to keep going. They sat for a while longer. Two brothers. No longer afraid of silence. No longer afraid of goodbye. Because they had learned. Love doesn't leave. It lingers. In songs unfinished. And bridges rebuilt. Summer arrived in full bloom. And with it came a kind of quiet that wasn't born of grief, but of reverence. It had been 3 weeks since David Mitchell passed. The Mitchell house was still full of people, yes. But mostly of stories. Julia kept the guest room stocked with fresh linens for visiting friends and neighbors who came to check in. Ryan's students came by with handmade thank you cards. Ethan installed a new mailbox with his father's initials carved into the wood. Life was still happening. But it moved differently now. Slower. More present. One bright Sunday morning, Ethan found Julia in the backyard with a box on her lap. "What's that?" he asked. She looked up and smiled softly. "Your father's things. From his desk drawer. I've been meaning to go through them." He sat beside her on the garden bench. Inside the box were little fragments of a life well lived. A worn leather watch, still ticking. Receipts from road trips. An old utility knife engraved with Mitchell & Sons, EST 1995. And a postcard Ethan had sent from a summer coding camp when he was 16. "I miss home. Tell Ryan to stop touching my stuff." Julia laughed when she saw it. "You were so dramatic." "I was right," Ethan muttered. They reached the bottom of the box together and found one last item, a folded sheet of paper, yellowed with age. Julia opened it. It was a hand-drawn diagram. A floor plan of sorts. The title scrawled at the top. Mitchell Family Retreat. One day. Ethan recognized the handwriting. "It's his," he whispered. The sketch showed a small lakeside cabin. A porch that wrapped around 3 sides. A recording studio in the back. A dock stretching into still water. At the bottom, David had written, "Not for building. Just for dreaming. But if they ever build it, I hope they fill it with music." Ethan stared at the drawing. Then looked at his mother. "Maybe some dreams aren't just dreams." Julia wiped a tear. "Maybe not." Later that week, Ethan showed the diagram to Ryan. They sat on the floor of the garage studio, the sketch unfolded between them like a treasure map. "You serious?" Ryan asked. Ethan nodded. "We use the grant money. The earnings from the project. I cash out some stock. We buy land. Build it exactly like this." Ryan ran his fingers along the paper's edges. "A real retreat. For family. For music. For healing. For memory," Ethan added. They looked at each other. And without another word, they agreed. Construction began in late summer. The brothers found a small plot of land near Lake Crescent, surrounded by old pines and quiet fog. They hired local builders, but did much of the work themselves, digging, sanding, wiring, painting. Julia visited every weekend, bringing pies and fresh herbs from the garden. Ava came once with her dad to help measure the studio walls. They framed the porch exactly as David had sketched it. They built the studio with floor-to-ceiling windows. They named it simply, The Grove. When it was finished, they hosted a small gathering, not an event, not a show. Just family and friends and neighbors and students. A circle of folding chairs on the dock. Hot cider. A bonfire. Ryan played the song one last time, The Lighthouse and the Bridge, but this time, he let others join in. One student brought a violin. Another played soft percussion with wooden spoons. Ethan triggered visuals that shimmered off the lake's surface. It wasn't perfect. And that's what made it beautiful. A few weeks later, Ethan walked the dock alone at sunrise. The lake was still. Mist hovered low. The air smelled like pine and peace. He took out his phone and opened a voice memo. He didn't know why. Maybe just to say something out loud into the quiet. "Dad," he said softly. "I hope we got it right. The porch. The dock. The space you dreamed of. It's all here. But more than that. Ryan and I, we're here. Together. And that's what I think you really wanted all along." He paused. Then smiled. Thanks for never giving up on us. Even when we gave up on each other. He saved the memo. Didn't send it. Didn't need to. Some messages aren't meant to be received. Only released. Ryan, meanwhile, had started writing again. But not just music, essays, poetry, journal entries. He taught a summer course at a local art center titled How to Finish the Song, Creativity and Closure. But in the first session, he said something unexpected. You don't always need to finish the song. Sometimes really singing it, is enough. And for the first time in his life, he believed it. Julia moved into a smaller cottage closer to town that fall, but she returned to the Grove often, sometimes to host, sometimes just to sit with her hands in the soil. She planted rosemary near the front porch. For remembrance, she said. When asked what she missed most about David, she would reply, the way he listened. Like nothing else mattered but what you had to say. People usually nodded, silently wishing they'd known him better. But his sons? They smiled. Because they had known him exactly as he was. Steady. Quiet. Deep as roots. Bright as a lighthouse. Strong enough to build a bridge from one heart to another. The Grove stood as proof that healing could take shape. Not as something dramatic or loud, but as a place to return to. Again and again. To remember. To begin again. To sing what remains. Autumn arrived like a soft exhale, spreading amber light across the trees that framed the Grove. Leaves curled and fell like slow confessions. The air cooled just enough to encourage sweaters and second cups of coffee. But something else had settled into the rhythm of life here, a new sense of belonging. Not just for the Mitchells, but for the people who drifted in and out of the space, students, neighbors. Traveling artists, grief support groups. The Grove had become more than a cabin by the lake. It had become a sanctuary. Ethan was the first to realize they needed help managing it. He'd caught himself building spreadsheets in the quiet moments between guitar tuning and tea making, and when he accidentally made a color-coded calendar for future bookings. Ryan raised an eyebrow and laughed. You're officially running a spiritual tech retreat, Ryan teased. Don't mock the system, Ethan replied. The guests love it. She visited the Grove every Sunday, arriving with warm bread and a knowing smile. Her presence grounded the place. When new visitors arrived, she was often the first person they spoke to. She'd greet them by name, offer them tea, and gently guide them around the space as if she had known them forever. One afternoon, she handed Ethan a manila folder. What's this? He asked. Something I've been keeping for the right moment. Inside were several printed emails and letters. Notes from people who had come to the Grove and left feeling changed. A woman who found the courage to forgive her estranged sister. A teenager who had lost his father and said the guitar lessons here sounded like hope. An elderly man who had scattered his wife's ashes by the lake and called the moment the beginning of the rest of his life. Ethan sat with the folder in silence, reading every word. Then he said quietly, I think we need to expand. Julia smiled. Then you better build something big enough to hold what's coming. That fall, Ethan and Ryan invited a small circle of friends and collaborators to help dream up the next phase of the Grove. They met around a campfire one evening, a large sketch pad spread out on a picnic table, mugs of cider in their hands. What if we added a greenhouse? Suggested Ava, now 12 and surprisingly insightful. People say plants grow better when you talk to them. Maybe healing does too. What about a recording booth people can book for audio journaling? Offered one of Ryan's students. Like a confession booth, but with reverb. We'll need more sleeping quarters if we keep hosting overnight workshops, Ethan noted, already jotting down dimensions in a notebook. Ryan, listening quietly, finally spoke. Let's build a foundation, he said. Not just a place. A program. A way to help people bring healing back into their own homes. That night, they stayed up late planning the beginnings of what would soon be called Project Lighthouse. Project Lighthouse became the beating heart of the Grove. It offered weekend retreats for families rebuilding after loss, artistic residencies for creatives working through trauma, volunteer programs that matched teenagers with mentors through shared storytelling, and a Fellowship Fund in David Mitchell's name, supporting young musicians who had lost a parent. Each participant left with a handcrafted candle, labeled with their name and a word they had chosen during their stay: forgiveness, rebuild, anchor, begin. The candles were made by Ryan and Ethan together, dipped in beeswax and love. One afternoon, Ethan received an unexpected email. It was from Sophia. He hadn't heard from her in over a year. Her name on the screen felt like a note from a song he once hummed but never sang. Subject line: passing through. Message: Hey Ethan. I'll be in Washington next week for a design symposium. Heard about the Grove through a colleague and realized, wait, I know these names. I'd love to visit. If the invitation's still open. No expectations. Just curiosity. Warmly, Sophia. He replied within 10 minutes. Come by anytime. It's a place for old stories and new beginnings. We saved you a chair on the porch. Sophia arrived on a Tuesday morning. The trees were just beginning to turn. She stepped out of her car wearing a light scarf, her eyes scanning the space like someone walking through the pages of a book they never finished. Julia greeted her first, as always. Ryan met her next. Their hug was brief but warm, two people who had once confused tension for closeness and now understood the difference. Finally, Ethan walked out from the studio. They stood facing each other. Hi, she said. Hi, he said back. She looked around. It's beautiful here. It became something we didn't know we needed, Ethan replied. They walked side by side down to the dock, neither rushing the moment. No unspoken hopes. No lingering regret. Just two people who had been part of each other's growth. I'm happy for you, Sophia said. For both of you. Ethan looked out over the lake. Thank you for being part of the fire that forged this. They sat in silence for a while, then Sophia smiled, stood, and said, I'll leave you to the light. And just like that, she was gone. And just like that, Ethan realized he hadn't lost anything. He had grown. That night, Ryan came into the kitchen holding 2 fresh candles. He placed one in front of Ethan. Ethan picked it up. His word was etched into the label. Forward. He looked up. Yours. Ryan held up his candle. Still. They both nodded. Fitting, Ethan said. And together, they stepped out onto the porch, lit the candles, and placed them on the railing, watching them flicker in the night breeze, not as a goodbye, but as a beginning. The morning sun spilled golden over the waters of Lake Crescent, casting shimmering paths that danced between the trees surrounding the grove. The gentle sound of rippling waves mingled with the distant calls of morning birds, creating a serene soundtrack for the start of a new day. Ethan stood on the dock, the crisp autumn air filling his lungs. In his hands was the journal his father had started decades ago, a worn leather-bound book filled with scribbled thoughts, sketches, and half-finished poems. It had been passed down to him by Julia last week with a quiet nod, as if she were entrusting him with something sacred. He opened the journal to a blank page near the back, and for the first time in a long time, he felt the space to write not lines of code, but words from the heart. Ryan approached, guitar slung over his shoulder, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. Early morning inspiration? He asked. Ethan looked up and nodded, trying to put down what Dad never could finish. Ryan settled beside him on the weathered wood bench. Maybe some stories aren't about finishing. Maybe they're about knowing when to let go and trust what's been planted. Ethan smiled, eyes tracing the horizon where the lake met the sky. Yeah, it's about new light, not just what fades away. Later that day, the grove buzzed softly with visitors. A group of young artists had arrived for a weekend retreat, painters, writers, musicians, all seeking the kind of quiet healing this place had become known for. Julia moved through the crowd with her usual grace, offering tea and encouragement, a gentle anchor for those who needed it. Ethan and Ryan led a workshop titled Echoes and Bridges, crafting stories through music and memory. The room was filled with soft light, and the walls bore the history of their family, photos, sketches, letters, and the glowing screens of their latest collaboration. As the workshop progressed, a young woman raised her hand. Did you ever think it would come to this? that your rivalry would lead to something so beautiful. Ethan and Ryan exchanged a glance. Not in a million years, Ethan admitted. But that's what healing does. It reshapes us. Forces us to see what really matters. Ryan added, sometimes you have to break apart to rebuild. And when you do, you find new foundations stronger than before. The woman nodded, eyes shining with unshed tears. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lake, Ethan and Ryan stepped outside to the porch. The air was crisp, scented with pine and earth. They lit 2 candles, setting them side by side on the railing. Forward, Ethan whispered, touching the flame gently. Still, Ryan replied, watching the flickering light. They stood in silence. The bond between them steady and unshakable, a testament to years of struggle, forgiveness, and love. That night, as the stars blanketed the sky, Ethan returned to the journal. He wrote the final lines he knew their father would have wanted. We're the bridges and the lighthouses, the echoes and the beginnings. In every ending, there is light, and in every heart a home. He closed the book softly, a sense of peace settling deep within him. The grove was no longer just a place. It was a promise, a place called forward.